Welcome to part 12 in the series. We'll be talking about framing in this chapter. Framing in perspective is as important as telling the story itself, and you can think of it as actually a part of storytelling. It tells the viewer on what to focus instead of hocus pocus. Different perspectives give different sense to the viewer, and these rules apply as much in 3D as they do in photography. If you want to convey a majestic nature of an element, you will frame such that the camera looks up. When you frame something that looks down on the elements, that gives a sense of subordination of the subject, that you've conquered something in a way. If you want to give a sense of scale, wider shots are generally preferred. Tighter shots with longer focal lengths are used for human subjects, where the focus is on the dialogue, as in what they are conveying verbally. So you can add depth in your scene by layering up the elements in the scene, meaning you can have a blurred foreground and a blurred background element that will convey more of a 3D feel to your shot instead of looking flat on a single plane. So this hopefully gives you a general idea of how the framing works. A little tip is to think in your mind what you want the shot to be like before you start working on the scene, and that's where having references comes back again. So when you know what shot you're going to take, frame your camera first as soon as possible. This practice will prevent unnecessary dilly-dallying around where you don't know how the camera angle would be and your scene starts to look unorganized and you start to get anxious and the scene is just all over the place. So with these preemptive preparations, you won't go back and forth in your process. Instead, you'll have a streamlined pathway in a serial fashion. Another thing is to set the lighting of your scene after you've set the framing, because lights look drastically different when looked at from different angles in relation to the subject. Our previous 4 videos were on lighting with an easy workflow, so if you skipped a thing or two, you can just go back and watch them if you like. Now, let's talk about a few rules of composition. The first and foremost is what we call as rule of thirds. So if you divide your scene into 9 zones using 2 vertical and 2 horizontal lines, naturally it's been observed that a scene looks more interesting when the subject is placed at one of the intersections of these 4 lines, rather than being placed in the dead center. It also gives the feeling that the subject has a story behind it and is not a solitary still life object. So try and frame your subject to one of the intersection of the lines. Similar to the rule of thirds is the golden ratio. Now we can generally divide this golden ratio into 2 further rules. The one is called the phi grid and the other is the golden spiral. In phi grid, the intersections are placed tighter together and placed similar to the rule of thirds. We can place subjects to one of those intersections. The rule of thirds is used more in photography and the golden ratio is used more in cinematography. So you can use the rule of thirds with still renders and the golden ratio with animation. The other sub-rule is the golden spiral, which is based off of the Fibonacci sequence, which is a derivative of math equation. So whole of this golden spiral leads to one main point of the subject. We use this framing method to shoot portraits, and in our case, render the portraits of subjects in 3D. Another thing to use is leading lines in order to draw attention to your subject. In this render right here, the subject is the glass containment unit, and I've used the lines of the cliffs in the background converging on it as leading lines to lead the viewer's eye to where the subject is and where they should be focusing. Blender actually comes with these reference lines. If you go and select the camera and under viewport display, there is a drop down of composition guides and you can check whichever one you want to use, and in the camera view you will have those lines to set. Third thing is to look for symmetry if you can. This is when 2 sides of your composition, either left or the right, the top or the bottom, they all look similar and kind of talk with each other. In this render again, you can see that the right and left sides are in sort of a symmetry. These pictures I took in London show the use of symmetry as well. The fourth thing is to declutter your scene and give breathing space to your model. Now we should be adding random props in our scenes, but not too much that they take the focus away from the story of the subject. Remember that all of the things we put into the scene are there to complement the story of the main subject, rather than taking the focus away. There's a free project file for you to experiment with. There's also an ebook that goes with the course and serves as a revision guide. Link is obviously in the description. It has the main points of all the previous and upcoming chapters, so you can just flip through while creating your renders. Alright, this has been it for the framing part of the series. Along with framing, lighting is a big part of the final look. If you struggle with lighting, you can go watch my step-by-step methodology of lighting your scenes. I'll see you there, or I'll see you in the next one. Farewell.